Balance of Terror is widely considered one of the greatest episodes of Star Trek ever made. It's a World War II submarine battle movie transplanted into space and told at twice the speed, whilst losing none of attention, and introduces us to so many incredible things in the universe and these helmets. Kirk, as captain of a vessel, has the privilege of marrying 2 officers. It's a nice communal moment that we see plenty of throughout the series. Unfortunately, even during these happy and peaceful times, Kirk doesn't stop being in charge. In the background of this happy event, the Enterprise is monitoring a series of border outposts that have stopped responding. Just before the vows are complete, Red Alert is signalled. Outpost 4 is under attack. It's a superb juxtaposition to start the episode off on the right foot, and you just know that one of the bride or groom is doomed. Following in the footsteps of famous wartime films like Mrs. Miniver, spoiler alert for an 80-year-old movie you'll never watch. Spock explains that they're approaching the Romulan neutral zone, detailing that the Romulan Star Empire was at war with Earth over a century ago, despite a complete lack of face-to-face combat or communication. This is more for the benefit of the audience than the crew, and is possibly the only clunky part of this whole episode. Yes, Spock, we already know this, stop lecturing us! On the other hand, nobody knows how the Romulans have developed in the century since the neutral zone has been established, which no ships are allowed to violate. The Enterprise may fight in self-defense on its side of the zone, but if they engage the enemy and get drawn into the zone, they're to be considered expendable when compared to keeping the uneasy truce. Romulan or not, something is methodically taking out the outposts with terrifying efficiency, but at this point, they have no idea who or what is responsible. It could be Balok and Bailey for all we know. Lieutenant Styles, hater of Romulans and resident xenophobe, yet still more capable than Bailey or Riley, interjects with familial knowledge about Romulan ship markings. He's convinced of the perpetrator's race and wants to blast them into pieces. Kirk points out that just because his relatives were killed by Romulans, doesn't mean that he has the right to a vendetta. These paraphrased words definitely won't come back to haunt him later. They make it to within contact range of Outpost 4 and Commander Hansen is the sole survivor of the initial attack. The ship was using some sort of unknown energy weapon, and it would be terrible if they unleashed it again. Oh, there we go. The Enterprise crew get to witness a second attack play out in real time from the outpost's feed, completely destroying the rest of it and pulverizing the asteroid that it was built on. The sensors detect something is out there moving, but they can't see what it is. Our first glimpse of a cloaking device. Or at least it would be, but they're cloaked, so we can't see it. The cloaked ship is heading back into the neutral zone, confirming in the minds of the crew that it was Romulan. Styles was right. Score 1 for the xenophobe! Our new lieutenant urges them to attack, but Kirk instead plots a parallel course, because they haven't been detected by their enemy yet. By matching the speed and direction of a vessel, he masks the Enterprise's movement by making it seem like a sensor echo. This buys them some thinking time, but ultimately the Enterprise can't enter the neutral zone without forcing a firefight, so Kirk only has so long before a decision needs to be made. Our captain shows that he's open to suggestions by listening to Sulu and Styles when they suggest a security alert in case of the Romulan spies. Unfortunately at this point, Uhura picks up a communication signal and is able to beam the image of a Romulan bridge directly onto their screens, allowing us to see the Romulans for the first time. And they look awfully like Vulcans. Styles doesn't take this well, seeing Spock as a collaborator in their midst who is clearly hiding something. Except that Spock seems surprised too. That's because it's an event that will impact his character for the next 50 years or so. Imagine finding out that the hidden enemy that tormented the ancestors of your friends was your cousin, and he looked just like you. Kind of a lot to take in, and kind of awkward on a ship full of humans. Uhura continues intercepting the Romulan signals, and Styles sarcastically suggests they give the role to Spock. Kirk tells him to keep his bigotry to himself and not display it on the bridge. This is probably the most open Star Trek has been about xenophobia so far, and echoes the humanistic message of judging the individual by their character, not their characteristics. Balance of Terror doesn't waste a moment, and we're now on board the Romulan ship, where the commander is speaking with his centurion. In addition to the Soviet connection, there are clear comparisons to both German military and Roman officers, with Roman words being used for rank and sometimes name, in the case of Sub-Commander Decius, who is swiftly demoted for sending out a subspace signal without authorization. The scene paints a picture of a battle-weary commander and his loyal advisor, questioning the ethics of his mission and just trying to make it across the border and home. This flies in stark contrast to what the audience were expecting. Firstly, the xenophobe isn't wrong about everything, and is a capable officer, and their opposition is no bloodthirsty monster of a week hell-bent on their destruction. Instead, we have a thoughtful and considered figure at odds with his own crew and societal norms, bound by duty and honour to comply, and struggling with the burden of command after hundreds of battles. Fortunately, the casting department chose Mark Lenard to fill this role, one of the greatest special guest stars in Trek history, but we'll get to that. Meanwhile, in the briefing room, Spock has recovered a bit of the outpost's shielding, made of the hardest substance known to Starfleet. Turns out the Romulan weapon shattered it to pieces, though oddly, despite their overwhelming weaponry, the ship doesn't appear to have warp capabilities. Styles loses his cool with Spock, and is surprised to learn that Spock actually agrees with him. Their best option is to attack while they still have a chance. McCoy disagrees, and sees this as potentially costing the lives of billions should it ignite the Earth-Romulan wars again. Damn it, McCoy, you're a doctor, not an interstellar diplomat! Kirk accepts that the assault is necessary, but only when the ship's trail becomes visible thanks to a passing comet. When we finally leap into action, it's not rocket ships shooting past each other and firing lasers like an episode of Flash Gordon. It's a careful and considered assault in the depths of space, using proximity blasts like depth charges to flush out the cloaked vessel as two military tacticians face off against each other. The setting and the consequences have been masterfully established, and we get to watch an intriguing game of thrust and counter-thrust as the large vessels attempt to land the winning blow. The Enterprise scores a hit, and the Centurion sacrifices himself to save his commander. The Romulan ship fires its plasma torpedo in what looks to be the decisive move, but the Enterprise discovers its limited range. The commander uses the body of his now dead former friend as a decoy amidst the debris to escape the Enterprise's sensors, and there's a begrudging respect forming between both men as they test each other's military prowess. Both ships enter the neutral zone and power down to avoid detection and recover from a previous engagement. It's been over 9 hours and Kirk is sleepless in his quarters. Rand is about as useful as a chief morale officer, but fortunately McCoy exists and sees the strain that the potential consequences of this firefight have put upon Kirk. The very consequences he helpfully pointed out in the briefing room earlier. Guilty conscience, Doctor. He then delivers one of the best lines of the entire series, while urging the captain not to destroy himself. It's beautiful foreshadowing. Spock accidentally activates a console while making repairs, or was it accidental? And the Romulan ship detects them, closing in for the kill. Kirk launches a counterattack swiftly and damages the vessel further, which then ejects more debris, but this time with a nuclear warhead. The warhead detonates when the Enterprise fires upon it, and leaves the Romulans in a position to strike the killing blow. Except the commander doesn't. He decides to head for home. Much to the disbelief of the remaining crew he has alive on board the vessel, Kirk lets the Enterprise list, playing dead in the hopes of luring the enemy in. Unfortunately, Tomlinson, the groom from the beginning, is down manning the phasers by himself, so Styles volunteers to join him. 2 brand new characters in a plot-critical area? What could possibly go wrong? Speaking of which, Decius convinces his commander to attack. Spock checks on the doomed phaser crew, but can't determine if one or both of them are going to die. Styles rudely shoos him off, making it even more difficult to tell. Shortly afterwards, the plot of the episode has sprung a coolant leak. Kirk orders the phasers to fire, and nothing happens. Spock races back and activates them, scoring a direct hit. With the warbird dead in the proverbial water and at their mercy, communication is finally established between the two vessels, and a dead man stares back at Kirk, who offers to help them, but the enemy commander refuses because it's not their way, activating self-destruct instead. It's at this point I'd like to remind you that we never even find out the names of the commander and Centurion. and it lets the audience wonder if they had just established some form of communication or dialogue, if things would have been different. In the aftermath, Rand lets Kirk know that Starfleet approved of his decision, and Kirk also discovers that Spock saved Styles, but not Tomlinson. Styles is humbled by this and realizes he was wrong to be prejudiced against a Vulcan, who has just saved everybody. Well, except Tomlinson. Kirk consoles the grieving former fiancée of the latest dead crewman, and then leaves the chapel. Balance of Terror ends with credits beamed over our gallant captain, striding with purpose down the ship's corridor. It proved that Trek could do military science fiction, established a brand new race of aliens, introduced torpedoes, established the neutral zone, and laid out the fundamentals of starship combat. It's a brilliant episode of television, full stop, not just Star Trek. Go watch it again. In the meantime, I'll just be spinning in my rotating bed with my android clone.